up.
Recording in progress.
Thank you, Jeannie. Thank you all for being here for my sobriety. I appreciate y'all. And it's a blessing that I can sit here today and tell my story and hope to, give hope, strength, and experience to other alcoholics, because I'm just glad it turned out that way, because my story is filled with ups and downs and consequences. So it's a privilege that I get.
Tyler, you muted yourself, baby.
Okay.
Thank you.
Did y'all hear that last part or no? All right. I'm about to go ahead and start. Okay. So thank y'all for being here for my sobriety. If I was muted for that. So I will start from the very beginning. I was born in Mobile, Alabama. We shortly moved to Gulfport right after I was born in Mobile. I think I was about a year old, so no recollection of that, but I grew up in Gulfport. When I was younger, as a young kid, it was just me and my mom. My dad moved to Maryland shortly after I was born, I believe. My father was not in the picture. My mom basically raised me herself as a kid. So it was just me and my mom, and we moved around from, apartments and little houses, and we didn't have much money back then. And my mom was in nursing school, so she was, doing that a lot of the time, and I was home alone, and I spent a lot of my time drawing, and I was very self-entertained. My mom said that she could just put me in the corner with some of my toys, and you wouldn't know I was there. I was a quiet kid. But yeah, it was just me and my mom in those younger years, and we had a house next to my grandpa, and my grandpa, I would go over to his house a lot whenever I was a kid. We were next door neighbors, so my mom would be, doing nursing school stuff or whatever it was, and I would go over to spend all my time at his house mainly. And my grandpa, he's someone that helped me identify as an alcoholic, because he had his own problems with alcohol and drinking. He's paralyzed, he's paraplegic, but he's a very wise person. He gained a lot of wisdom from, his mistakes or whatever. So I just remember him always giving me a lot of good advice when I was younger. Like he would just show me a glass of water and say, "Is this glass half empty or half full?" And we would just talk about just all kinds of different stuff. But I really look up to my grandpa, and he was my main male role model and still is today. But every year, whenever I was younger, I was a lonely kid. I would say I was lonely. I wished for a brother or sister every year for Christmas, and so when I was about 8 years old, I got my Christmas wish came true because my mom married my stepdad. So when I was 8, my mom married my stepdad, and it was great. He was a great guy. He is a great guy. He was a pharmacist. We moved into a cool house. It was a nice little life change for 8-year-old Tyler. I was blessed. I changed schools. I started going to a new elementary school, and that's where I met some of my best friends. 3 of my best friends that I still have today. And one of them just got married last month, and I was the best man in his wedding. So I was blessed to meet some amazing friends at that age. That was in 2nd grade, and that'll be important later in my story. But those friends have meant a lot to me. But elementary school and middle school, I played sports. Me and my friends played video games. We would throw the football in the front yard or just do typical, young kid stuff. I had a great childhood. I was blessed. It was nice. I didn't cause too much trouble yet. I was a good kid. I will say that. So high school, I went to Gulfport High School. I played I played sports for Gulfport, mainly baseball. Baseball was my main sport that I played. Um, I never really had to try too hard in school because I kind of just breezed through school, to be honest. I didn't pay it too much attention. I got A's and B's, but as far as me having to put in a lot of effort to get good grades, um, I didn't have to. And that definitely affected me later in life. But at that time, most of my concerns were on baseball and sports and hanging out with my friends. Um, it was around this time, it was around like 10th grade that, me and my friends started experimenting, and we would go get an older kid to buy us a bottle of alcohol and go to the woods and we drank it and we started kind of experimenting with alcohol around this time. So those were my first experiences with alcohol and um I thought it was fun at that time. Um so that was around ninth or 10th grade that I started doing that and then around by the time I reached 11th grade, that was when I started partying more and I started going to parties on the weekends. Um, Mostly with the older in 10th and 11th grade, I'll go with the older kids to parties on weekends and um, I really enjoyed it. I just loved to party as a high schooler. So that's how it started out for me. I also started experimenting with other drugs as well. Smoked weed for the first time and just tried some other stuff. Um, and it was around 11th grade that things kind of started changing for me. And even back then, I can see how these things affected me and my just path. So I started to grow apart from baseball. And I loved baseball, but my main concern around 11th grade was that, I was going to go to Ole Miss and I had a plan to go to Ole Miss for pharmacy school. And also another part of it was I wanted to go to Ole Miss because of the parties and stuff like that. So I had no ambitions to play baseball in college. And I didn't see a future there. So I really started to grow apart from it. And also my coaches, they knew what I did on the weekends and I would show up to the summer workouts hungover. And they saw that my dedication wasn't there as much. So they stopped playing me. And um, it affected me in that way, and I stopped playing and I grew apart from it. My senior year, I quit baseball. Um, and my just partying and hanging out with my friends, and just whatever it was, just drinking or smoking weed like during the weekdays. It ramped up during that time around senior year and then definitely senior summer. Um, and then right before I graduated, this was one of the first of a few consequences that affected my path was I got caught with marijuana in my car um, about 2 months before I graduated high school. And they basically didn't give me anything. They just kind of gave me a warning as far as the courts were concerned. But my high school basically didn't let me finish. I mean, they let me finish, but they basically expelled me or suspended me. They suspended me for the rest of the year. And I was not able to walk at graduation. So that was a disappointing time. I wasn't too hurt about it, to be honest, but I know I disappointed my family. So that was really just the consequences started. Alcohol and drugs started affecting my life, even as far as back as high school. So After high school, I go to Ole Miss. I lived in the freshman dorms, which are like known for just being like a party 24/7. I never went to class. My first semester, I got a 0.48 GPA out of 4.0. It's not something I'm proud of. Um, but I never went to class. That's what it was. And I had one class that didn't penalize me for missing classes, and it was chemistry. And I looked at my report card and it said I had missed 30 days of chemistry class. And I was thinking to myself, I didn't even know that we had 30 classes. Um, but anyways, during that time while I was in college, I know drugs and alcohol were affecting me because during that time I was really trying to handle school, and it was just, I found it impossible. I would really try to muster up all the willpower that I could, um, I'd have these plans for the day, and I'll be like, I'm doing them no matter what. And it would just never happen, you know? And looking back on it, it was just, I never felt ready to start doing the things. I was never ready to face life or face the things that I needed to do. I always needed to change my mindset, whether it was I needed to like take the edge off, or I needed to like take an Adderall to do my homework. And then after I take the Adderall, like take something to like take off the edge. Like I was just never ready to actually just do the things I needed to do. I was always focused on trying to just feel a certain way to do them, if that makes sense. And I just never got anything done. Um, it was very self-centered, because I was there. Um, my parents had allowed me to go to college, and had given me this opportunity. And I felt like I was trying, but at the same time, it was just drugs and alcohol were really coming in the way. And it was just unmanageable for me. Um, so I ended up getting kicked out of Ole Miss. Um, and what happened was you get two strikes before you get kicked out. So they found alcohol in my room, and then I there was a music festival that weekend, and I had gotten, some. I was prepared for the music festival. I picked up some drugs and I had them in my car, and I couldn't smoke weed in the dorm, so I'd have to drive to the park and smoke, and I would smoke in my car, and it was so dumb. But I was smoking in my car, and a cop pulled up right behind me and caught me. And in my car for that weekend was um, LSD, ketamine, and MDMA. And I got caught with all three of those. And I was charged with possession of LSD, ketamine, and MDMA. And they were very serious charges. I got kicked out of Ole Miss. I disappointed my family. They gave me 2.5 years of probation to serve. And this was when things really just started to go downhill for me. So I got kicked out. Around the time that I was in college, I was very egotistical, and I wanted money, and I was a broke college student. I didn't make any money. I was just going to college. I didn't have much of an allowance. And the egotistical side of myself, and then the side of myself that just liked to party all the time, I decided to basically I started selling drugs to try to start making money. And then it also went with my lifestyle at the time, to just help me to save money and keep partying like 24/7, basically. So you would think that me getting caught with this, with like getting charged with this, I had to move back to Gulfport. You would think that I would slow down, but I really didn't. Once I got back to Gulfport, I kind of ramped up all of that. I started selling more. Um, and I went back to school and I managed to do a community college semester and I managed it. I was still hiding a lot from my family. I was living like sort of a double life. I always had something to hide from the people around me. It was very stressful, very stressful. So um, at that time, I after after I did that semester, I convinced my parents to go back to Ole Miss again. Um, and I'd convinced them that I would do it right this time. Um, and they believed me and they let me. And I went back to Ole Miss again after getting kicked out. And that semester, I think I did one semester and I managed. And then my alcohol and drugs, it just at that time was consuming my mind, and things just started ramping up. I wouldn't use drugs or alcohol in the morning. I used to, it turned from me drinking just on the weekends to now I'm doing it in the morning to wake up. I'm doing it throughout the day. Um, my whole schedule is just revolving around it. And so it got a lot, it got a lot worse. And needless to say, I was at a point where I knew I was about to fail again. And I was about to fail again. I was heavily drinking and using and just felt lost at that time. And I just rebelled against my whole path at that time. So I had the idea that I would move to New Orleans, and my plan was to be an artist. I was planning on moving to New Orleans and being an artist. So um, I moved to New Orleans, um, and things just got worse. And the reason I chose to move to New Orleans was because I already had connections in New Orleans, and I knew a few people, but they were not the right connections. They were the people that I was getting alcohol and drugs from. So I moved there and I had no job. I was trying to convince my parents that I had a job, and I was lying to them about having a job. I had no job the whole time. Um, Around that time, I started owing people money because, doing what I was doing, it didn't always play out the way I was expecting, whether someone took my money or something like that. And I started owing people large sums of money, and it was very stressful. And at this time, I was very lonely. I really just, it was a very lonely time for me. My mental state really deteriorated, and my alcohol and drug use was just at an all-time high. I remember a very important moment looking back on it was I had money, I had money and I had the choice, I could either go to this concert, I had the money to go to this concert, and I had the choice to either go to this concert or just stay at home and spend this money on alcohol and drugs and do it at home, and I chose to just stay home and do alcohol and drugs rather than the concert, and that was a concert that I wanted to go to, but at that time it was just I was isolating, and it was just easier, I guess, for me to just stay home. And that's just how much drugs and alcohol ran me. And also just the stress of, people looking for money from me every single day. It caused me to keep doing more drugs and alcohol and keep drinking. Um, my phone would die, and I didn't even want to put it on the charger because I knew that as soon as I charged it, I wouldn't have the excuse that my phone was dead anymore. Um, so a very lonely time. And around that time, I ended up getting into a very toxic relationship. And a large part of the reason I stayed in it was because I was so lonely. And that time was just it it brought me further into my alcoholism and my addiction. Um, it was, let me think. It was a very toxic relationship. A lot of cheating going on her part, and I stayed with her, and because I think it was mostly out of loneliness, and I had, and when I think of demoralization, I think of this point in my life because I was in a toxic relationship. I was staying with a person that I knew wasn't good for me just because it helped in the moment, I guess, but it really didn't. Um, I started doing things that I never expected myself to do. I started to turn into a different person, I started to, um, not out of necessity, but out of just pure desperation, I started taking other people's money, I started taking other people's money to pay this person back. And it was just a vicious cycle. And I was creating, enemies and resentments. And it was a vicious cycle and a very lonely time for me. Um, so I got a job at a restaurant eventually. And my schedule would be I would go into work at about 3 p.m. and then close the restaurant at about 11 p.m. And then after we closed at 11, I would go out, I would walk to the bar and drink every single night. And I'll basically stay up every single night, all night. And then um, I was just not managing at all. Every night I would stay up every night, and then the morning would come, the sun would be coming up, and I'm still with whatever friends lasted that long. And I'd get my shift covered every single day, and then eventually they took me off the schedule. And I felt offended. I was like, y'all fired me? Like, y'all took me off the schedule? And they're like, you get your shift covered every single day. And I was like, dang. I was like, come on, I needed that job. Um, I was just not managing. And then there was 2 months, the last 2 months I was in New Orleans, I didn't pay rent. My rent was due, and I spent it all on alcohol and drugs. And I was living with three friends. And the second month, they were like, "Look, we're about to get a new roommate," and I was like, I was just so like oblivious to my own actions. I was like, I thought we were better than that, like I thought we were better. Like y'all are gonna kick me out. Like I thought we were cooler than that. Um, but yeah, not a pretty story at all. So around that time, right, like those last 2 months in New Orleans, I found out that the toxic relationship I was in, um, she was pregnant. She was pregnant, and at that time, I was very egotistical. I was selfish. I was not ready to bring a child into this world. It came in the way at that time for me. I saw it as something that came in the way of all of my plans for the future because I was very just selfish, and and it just and then I also felt like I was like, wow, like I don't know. I was just not prepared to have a child with this person. So that happened, and it really caused turmoil in my life because I was really worried about it, and I didn't know how I was gonna navigate, bringing a child into this world, and I was very nervous and scared, and so that led me to it led me to a 3-day binge, and this binge is important because it ends tragically. But anyways, so I did a 3-day binge, and on the third day of this binge, I was stressed out. I was also at this point I was like depression was definitely a part of my story. It had been there since I got kicked out of Ole Miss and a little bit before that. But I was very depressed and just trying to numb my feelings at that time, feeling so stressed out about this child that I didn't want to continue. I just didn't want to continue living because I didn't see a way. I felt trapped, and so I went on this binge, and it was a 3-day binge, and on the third day, I'd been up for basically 3 days, other than a few naps. I went to a party, and um, I was at this party, and I ended up leaving the party and went to Walmart, and I had two girls in the car with me. And on the way from Walmart back to the party or wherever we were going, I really don't remember a whole lot about this. Um, but on the way back, I basically passed out behind the wheel from exhaustion. My body was just shutting down, and I hit a tree. I crashed into a tree, and the two girls that were in the car with me got injured, and it was terrible. They got injured. They were serious injuries. They're okay now. I'm not to downplay it, but they're okay now. They were serious injuries. You know, there was surgeries involved. There was one had a back surgery, one had a neck surgery. There was a broken arm. But yeah, so that happened, and after that, that was a crucial moment for me, because I'd gone from being so stressed out about having this child brought into the world, you know, and I tried to deal with my feelings by numbing them out by going on this binge or whatever, and it just caused so much pain to others, you know, and now I'm in like a totally different situation than I was, you know, a few days ago. Um, so I felt terrible. I felt so bad. I didn't know what to say. I mean, I did talk to them afterwards, and I didn't know them very well either. I really kind of met them for the first or second time that night, but I didn't know what to say. I felt terrible about myself. I hated myself at this moment. And I did text them and say sorry, but my sorry just felt very weak in light of the consequences of my actions. I really just felt like the bad guy. I was receiving a lot of hate from other people. They were pretty cool about the situation. Like they were very nice about it and handled it very nicely with me, but at this time I just hated myself. I had other people that didn't like me. I didn't like myself. I didn't want to continue living. I saw no way forward in this moment, and this was my all-time low. This was my low. This was my bottom, and I didn't see any way forward. You know, I was back in my parents' house, staying with my parents, and so I was like, if I don't want to live my life anymore, and I'm not going to end my life, but I don't want to live my life anymore, is there any path forward for me? And I was like, I'm just going to not live my life for myself in this moment. I'm just going to start doing what my parents ask me to do. I'm basically just going to live my life for my parents. That's what I decided in that moment. And so a few days passed, and my parents came to me and they told me that they thought I needed to go to rehab, and I didn't want to at all. And I was still having intense cravings. And I wish I could say that that was the last time I drank or used, you know, but it wasn't, you know, and I had no way to get out of rehab. There was nowhere to run, you know. My whole life I had been justifying my actions and getting out of stuff and manipulating situations. And this situation was just one that I had nowhere to turn, nowhere to run. And I agreed to go to rehab. Um, so I went to rehab, and I felt defeated when I got there. And I told myself that I'll just do the 30 days, you know, and just like I'd been doing, I'll do 30 days and get everyone off my back, and just be smarter next time, or control my alcohol next time, or whatever I was telling myself. But I started to while I was in rehab, I met a couple people that definitely affected my path, and one of them was a friend, and he was there with me, and he had been to like 14 rehabs, right, which is crazy, but I'd met him, and I was young. I was 21 at this time, in rehab, and he was like, "Look, Tyler, you're young. I wish that I'd gotten this when I was your age." He was like, "Don't keep doing this. Try to get this your first time." He's like, don't try not to be like me." Basically, that's what he told me, and it stuck with me because I also started identifying around this time because I looked at my family. I had alcoholics in my family. I looked at just I started to get a little bit of clean and sober time and be able to actually reflect on all of my decisions. And then the fact that my decisions were injuring and hurting other people was a huge factor in me because in my, change of thinking, because I was never worried about hurting myself or what I did to myself. But when it started affecting other people, everything just got put into perspective for me. Um, So I did start identifying and I started learning about, a higher power. I started learning about the disease while I was in rehab. Um, and I had a divine intervention happen during this time, as I see it, because I had started to learn about the higher power. And someone came to me while I was in rehab and offered me drugs. And I decided I was going to buy them. And I gave him the money. And I was basically waiting on him to give them to me. And during this time, I just felt the need. I laid down and I closed my eyes and I just asked the question, to a higher power, God or whoever it was. I said, should I be buying drugs right now? And it sounds insane looking back on it because it's like, duh, like, no, you're not, like, obviously. But um, in that moment, I asked that question. I said, should I be doing this right now? It's just a big no. And so I was like, all right. I was like, okay, okay. Like I heard my higher power in that moment. So, and then right afterwards, that same friend came up to me and pulled me to the side and was like, hey, I know that people are offering drugs. Like, don't mess with it. Like stick to sobriety and like I'm just looking out for you. Like he was just trying to give me advice, but I found it just super very like just the way it happened, like as soon as I prayed and as soon as I stood up from praying, my friend came in and talked to me about it. I just saw it as a divine intervention for me, and it was kind of a moment for me that I had. Um, so I completed rehab. I stayed sober. I completed rehab. And this was in Jackson. I went to rehab in Jackson. They brought me to a meeting called Yana, and it was called You Are Not Alone. And that just really like stuck with me because I'd felt lonely for so long, and now I was with, people that I could relate to in a way that I hadn't found before. Um, so I completed rehab. While I was at rehab, I met a fantastic therapist that I started seeing, and then I got my certificate. And at this time, we're pushing my court date back. Um, So we're pushing my court date back. And in my mind, I think I'm getting house arrest. So let me speed up a little bit. I don't want to run out of time. Um, I decided to stay in Jackson because they say people, places, and things, and I was very determined. Um, I did have a relapse. I went to the airport. Hold on 1 second.
Recording stopped.
I'm sorry, I'm having technical difficulties. Okay. All right. So I relapsed right after rehab. I went to Nashville.
Recording in progress.
I went to Nashville with my family, and I still saw alcohol and drugs as different things. And I drank 2 beers in the airport. And after that, after I drank those 2 beers, I'd made a conscious decision to cut certain people out of my life. And after I drank those 2 beers, while I was finishing the second one, I got a FaceTime from one of my old friends. An old friend started calling me, one of the people that I decided to cut out of my life. I just, in that moment, I just saw myself going backwards. I had drank, and now this person's calling me, and I saw myself just going backwards in my path. And it was just another one of those moments that I had that felt like divine intervention the way it happened. And that was my last relapse. That was July 27th, 2019. So I stayed in Jackson. At that time, I had to get a job. My daughter was on the way. I decided to do this electrical program, and I stayed in Jackson for about a year until COVID started. During that time, I did an electrical program, and I went to a meeting every single day for about a year. I got my paper signed because at this time I was getting my paper signed for court and everything. So for a year, I basically focused on recovery. I did school, and I healed a lot in that year in Jackson. COVID hit, and I moved back to Gulfport, and I quickly got a job as an electrician, and I started doing virtual meetings. I got a job as an electrician. I was paying my child support. I was staying sober. Things were going really well. I was taking a drug test every single month for court. And so I stayed in Jackson for that year and healed. I got a job as an electrician, and I was traveling around Florida, building new Dollar Generals. So it was nice. It was a good time for me. But I still had court over my head. So my court date, we pushed back my court date 2 years. My court date finally was coming up. It was October 11th, 2021. And we had meetings with my lawyer, and they made me a few ridiculous offers. I thought I was getting house arrest, and I go to my lawyer's office 2 weeks before my court date, and they offer me 50% of 15 years. I had 2 counts of aggravated DUI. And it was a shocker to me. But we negotiated, and the final agreement between me and my lawyer and the prosecutor was 50% of 5 years. So I went to court. I had my signed papers for my meetings. I had my chips. I had 2 years of sobriety. I had a drug test every month. I had a letter from each of the girls kind of vouching for me in a way. And I had a letter from my therapist. And they basically lowered my sentence 1 year. So instead of 50% of 5 years, I got 4 years. So that meant I would have to serve 2 years, 2 years in prison. So I had 2 years of sobriety, and it was time for me to go to prison for 2 years. This was a time that took a lot of acceptance for me, and I knew what I needed to do to stay sober. So during my stay in prison, this was October 11th, 2021 that I started. I eventually got to a work camp in Hattiesburg, and I spent 15 months there. And while I was there, everybody knew about my sobriety, and I had a ton of conversations with people about sobriety while I was in there. I started teaching the alcohol and drug program at Forest County Work Center. So I was teaching that program, and then I was also holding meetings Tuesdays and Thursdays, which we'd have, 3, 4, 5. It was hit or miss with the meetings. It was definitely not the same, but I was holding meetings on Tuesdays and Thursdays while I was in there. And I had a ton of conversations with other alcoholics, and I definitely feel like I had an impact on a few of them. I still keep in touch with a few of them that are still sober. And that's how I stayed sober while I was in there. I knew that I needed to help other alcoholics, and I knew I needed to stay close to my higher power. So that's what I did while I was locked up. Um, so I paroled out October 11th, 2023. Paroled out. I had 4 years sober at this time. I was not able to get my chips. I was excited to get out and get my chips. Um, but I paroled out after 2 years, and I'm back in Gulfport now, and I've found an amazing home group in Gulf Coast Group of Alcoholics Anonymous. Um, I've got an amazing sponsor that I've been working with. I just feel super blessed to have, great meetings to go to again and people to really relate to. In that way, it feels great to go to meetings again after 2 years of not having any. Um, but my home group has been amazing. I've been reworking the steps. I have an amazing sponsor, and I've sponsored 4 people at this point. So I'm working on, sponsoring other people, and something that I really like doing. And I'm finishing school. I've been spending time with my daughter. While I was in prison, my daughter visited me every month. So I was able to keep contact with her. My family and my daughter visited me. But now that I'm out, I've really been able to spend a lot more time and be there for her. And I get her about 2 weeks out of every month, a week or 2 weeks out of every month. She lives in Lafayette, Louisiana. But since I've been out, things have been amazing. I was the best man at my best friend's wedding. I went to Disney World with my daughter. I've stayed sober. Um, Things have been great. Life has been amazing. I'm super grateful. It's definitely been a humbling experience, but definitely grateful. At this point, I decided to go back to school, and I work. I have a job. I'm working. I do the inventory at a pharmacy, and I'm going to school. I'm finishing my degree. So, and things have been going so much better than in the past. Like being sober and going back to school is like a night and day difference. I've already passed 4 classes since I've been out. I've been out 6 months. So I've already passed 4 classes, and I'm just trying to get it over with as quick as possible, to be honest. But um, things have been great. I'm super grateful. Um, so yeah, that's basically my story. Thank you all for inviting me, and thank you for letting me share. Thank you to Eric for inviting me. I appreciate y'all being here for my sobriety.